You remember what the affective filter was?
Yep. When you
Okay.
need to have your affective filter low if you want your students to learn more.
Right, exactly. Right. The affective filter is like this wall that is built in a student's brain that blocks comprehensible input, that doesn't allow them to acquire the language. And this wall is built by different things. And that's what we're going to see in Jenny's presentation today on affect, the importance of affect in acquisition. So Jenny, we're ready to listen to you. Go ahead if you want to share your screen.
Yeah, thank you so much. Let me share. Yeah. So, good afternoon, professor, classmates, and colleagues. I'm gonna tell you about, or I'm gonna speak about what is affect. Just please hold on a second. That it is charging. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you about affect. And here there is one of the dictionary's definition that it is affect is a feeling or emotion as distinguished from cognition, thought, or action. In other words, it refers to the feelings and emotions that individuals have about something. In the case of language learning, about the people who speak the language, or about the culture where the language is spoken. Also, language shock, talking about this one, talking about the feelings and the emotions, I may tell you that the students, just a second, go back. What is going on? Yeah, here it is. Sorry. The language learning has two processes. The language could be affected because of the language shock, or maybe the culture shock. So the language shock refers to the realization that as a learner, you must see that a chemical of speakers that the target language called the target language, or whereas the culture shock, which refers to the anxiety or maybe the disorientation from exposure to a new culture. But previously, let's check what is the culture shock. As you can see it here, there is an image where in this cartoon, this image or this character, it is kind of afraid. He's checking what is going on about their environment, and they said, "Hey, you're back. How was your trip?" I still get culture shocked. Okay, culture shocked from being abroad. No, from being back home. Okay, so probably that student, that person feel homesick or something like that. So talking about culture shock, in terms we use to describe the feelings of confusion and uncertainty that experience when you come into contact with a new culture that it is vastly different from your own. Studies suggest that the both language shock as cultural shock are important for the second language learners because they may affect the acquisition. This situation mostly affects the foreign students, immigrants, and refugees. So right now, let me show you a video where some people, just this, okay, where some people that belong to different different continents were interviewed, and what were their experiences in another country, and what was the culture shock that have been affecting them in their learning process. So let's pay attention, please. This video doesn't last more than 3 minutes and a half.
Hi, I'm Christy. I'm from New York and I did an exchange year in the UK.
My name is Val, Bulgaria, and I studied in Denver, Colorado.
I'm Stephanie from Hong Kong and I study in Newcastle University.
Hi, I'm Aria. I'm from Australia and I studied in Fairfax, Virginia.
My name is Emmanuel. I'm from Nigeria and I study in London.
It was really exciting to see the architecture, the culture and the people.
When I went there, everybody was really good with me and helped me with everything.
I guess we were so used to watching like English movies when we were back in Nigeria. So actually being here and seeing it for, in real, we were very excited.
As you go though, it starts to become a little bit more daunting.
I started to miss things that I was used to having around me all the time. I missed my friends and my family.
I was so used to seeing them all the time that, now that we were so far away, it was quite hard.
I felt homesick and then I felt sad and really want to go back to home.
I'd never been away from my parents for longer than a couple of weeks at a time, and that was really hard.
Some people warned me about this phase, the culture shock.
Culture shock.
Culture shock.
The infamous culture shock.
I think one of the biggest differences was just the phrases they used.
The accents was very difficult to kind of understand.
Mate,
Hit the town.
And everything was always brilliant. Seriously? No, it's not.
knackered.
It swings and roundabouts.
Seriously, what does that mean?
I was really overwhelmed.
I felt overwhelmed with everything, really.
I guess just the way of life, it was very busy and
New people, new university, new surroundings.
It was quite hard to get around at first.
you had cabs, you had trains, you had buses, and
You have to just work out, which one to take, which one not to take.
And believe it or not, the food is different.
I tend to really crave Nigerian food.
I really miss Chinese food.
I really missed my mom's cooking and my grandma's as well.
Because my cooking, to be honest, is terrible.
So that's when I realized I needed to learn how to cook.
So I ended up cooking a lot at home, but I think the best part of that was I started to bond with my flatmates a lot more.
So, yeah, I'm learning.
When I was feeling a bit homesick, someone suggested that maybe I speak to the welfare advisors.
And they reassured me that I wasn't the only one who felt overwhelmed.
And one of the things they suggested was, try and decorate my room to make it feel a little bit more homely.
After a while, I started to get more comfortable here.
I joined badminton societies and I really met lots of English people there, and I felt like my English got improved.
I started talking to people a lot and feel more confident in myself and my language.
Everything started to feel a little bit more normal. I made more friends, I started going out more, socializing a little bit.
That was a big transition for me. It made me feel, a lot more at home.
I managed to adjust to the new culture.
And I adjust to the weather, the food, and the language.
And I ended up making so many friends, both international and both, people from here.
To be honest, it was the best decision I've ever made, even though there were some challenges.
I learned.
Okay, so up to now, as you can see at first the students they didn't feel confident with themselves because of the environment, because of the probably they have anxiety to do some things, but at the end they could succeed in their purposes. But sometimes the anxiety and the stress may affect this learning process. So let's talk about a little bit the anxiety. Just a second. Yeah, here it is. So the learning, when they are acquiring a language, we are going, and the students will be able to be under pressure, they will feel stress and they will feel anxiety, as I have mentioned again before. So in sum, what the author says, that the book that I have read, is that the anxiety, competitiveness, as well as the shocking and new, maybe it will create an uncontrollable situation that can make the language process a situation a little bit problematic or maybe stressful. So talking about this one, okay, anxiety seems to be presented in a trait that falls within a border area scheme of factors affecting the learning process, but it's not clear whether if it is rather a personality or maybe an emotional reaction to a situation, or is a combination of both. However, anxiety is not always a negative factor in learning, because it is curvilinear effect. It has a curvilinear effect on the performance. So if there is a low anxiety level, the students will be able to face that trouble, and they will succeed at the end, as we can see it in the video that we have already seen. At the end, they succeed. Or maybe, but we have to be careful with this aspect, that if it is a high anxiety level, it could hurt, it could probably, the student will feel frustrated, probably the student will be black to learn. There are some cases when the students feel the rejection to learn another language because they don't feel so confident. And right now we are going to see another video where there are some people that don't feel confident when themselves. They don't know how to interact with the other ones, and the others, they have faced this anxiety that they sorry, just let me show you this one, the other video. So we are going to see some experiences. They are funny. There are some of them that are kind of funny, but it could be according to the reality that some people.
Shen Yi Zhan? How do you spell? So what's the name?
Yeah.
Shen Yi Zhang.
Shen Yi Zhan? How do you spell that?
Oh, never mind, Sam.
Sam.
¿Puedo pedir carne asada con arroz blanco y verduras, por favor?
Sorry, I don't speak Spanish.
Oh, this is a Mexican restaurant, though. Can you pass me the jianbing tangjiang?
The what? The pepper?
No.
Oh, you want the pen?
No, tang...
The syrup?
Yes, syrup.
Ooh. Hey, Sam, what's this?
Oh, this is Korean.
What does it say? Can you translate it?
No, I speak Chinese.
Oh, I see you're fluent in Spanish.
Yes, I am.
What would you say to a client in Spanish?
Hola. It's just on the spot right now.
Are you sure you speak Spanish?
Pollo.
What's he saying?
I can't...
Ooh, wait, what did he just say right there? Wait, okay, can you tell me what's going on? I don't understand. What is he saying to her? Ooh, is this Szechuan sauce? Szechuan sauce?
Do you mean Sichuan?
I don't know what that is. Szechuan.
Si eres muy guapa, no es ugly. 对啊，她也很聪明，一点都不 dumb.
Dumb? Ugly? You guys are horrible!
No! That's no.
Ooh, what's this one over here?
So that's 小笼包.
Which one is the broccoli? Can you read the description? Wait, actually, what's this one right here?
I can't read all of this. I only know 200 characters.
What is this one? What is my Chinese name?
Sierra?
No, like how do you say my name but in Chinese?
Sierra.
Wow, that is amazing!
Okay, what's the funniest kind of Chinese food?
What?
Juke.
I don't get it.
I promise it's really funny if you speak Cantonese.
So the most important thing about like the scientific
Chromosome 是什么意思？male 是男士 ，female 是女士。
That makes sense, right?
Yes.
Okay, so as you can see, some people could face here, as I have mentioned, because they have a low level of anxiety. Okay, in the other cases, in another situation, the students couldn't succeed, or they feel a little bit frustrated, and that is our purpose as English teachers to try to help them to acquire the language. And now that is when we are going to talk about, just a second. That's why the affected filter intend to account. Just give me a second, please. Yeah. Yeah, the affected filter intend to account the relationship that to second language learning, why some people were able to learn languages while others were not. And affect from crashes, from crashing perspective is intended. Open up. Just a second, please. I don't know what is going on with. Yeah, okay, here it is. Affected filter, yeah. So as I was saying, after from crashing perspective is intended to include factors such as motivation, maybe the attitude, or maybe the self-confidence and anxiety, as I have mentioned before. So he proposed an affected filter if the filter here, can you see the image? I'm sorry, I don't know if it is working well because mine is not working well. It is
Yes,
supposed.
you can see the image. It's just not in full screen.
I am sorry. So here we have the hypothesis that the author was saying. So according to his perspective, he says that if the filter is up, okay, the input is prevented from passing through. And there can be no acquisition, as we have heard yesterday. So, but if the input is down, is low, the filter is down or low, and the input is comprehensible, the input will reach the acquisition device and the acquisition will take place. To sum up, according to Gratian, there are two conditions that are necessary for the acquisition, for the language acquisition. That is that we needed a comprehensible input and also a low or weak affected filter. So we must remember that the input is everything that the teachers give to the students. It could be either orally or maybe written, and we have to consider how is our environment. If the teacher is sympathetic, if the teacher is kind, also if the student is not hungry, or maybe there are some noisy outside the class. All these situations, all these aspects may affect the language acquisition. So we must remember that all these aspects, in order to help our students to the language acquisition and get a successful and understandable output. And here is my question to discuss. Yeah, here. What teacher behavior can cause a high anxiety behavior in students, I mean? So that is what I have. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry, I don't know what is going on with this presentation slides.
That's okay. Thank you, Jenny. Yes, Miguel.
Oh, quick question here. I think it should be for everyone. What do you think? I heard it should be comprehensible input, right? Does it count if I use, I don't know, a video in Spanish or in French with English?
Well, it depends what is your purpose, what is your objective. If you are going to make a comparison about maybe another language, you may use it. What I'm talking about a comprehensible input is that the students can understand clearly what is your purpose and why you are using that input. As I have mentioned, it could be orally or maybe it could be written. It depends what are you going to use to get.
So they need to understand my purpose, or I should keep it for me, because as far as we know,
No. It must not be clear for a student. It must not be clear for your students, and the purpose must be clear, obviously. So if you have that video, if you're going to present that video, you must have a purpose for it. The instructions must be clear, and so the students can understand well what are you going to do with that video.
I understand it should be. I know it should be according to their level. I get the point, and that was clearly my question. Is like, if they are going to watch the video, maybe they won't understand. If it's in French, for example, they won't understand anything from the audio, but they can read the subtitles. Is that a comprehensive input? That the instruction also will be clear. Let's be clear on that. The level is appropriate. The instruction is pretty clear on what they have to do after they watch it. But the listening audio won't be in their native language, neither in their native language nor the English, but they will have English subtitles. What do you think?
I mean, normally when we talk about comprehensible input, ideally we give oral and written input. See, one thing is developing skills like listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And another thing is providing them with comprehensible input to be able to acquire the language. Acquire what? Grammar and vocabulary, right? So ideally what we would want is, and you guys will see this next week, is provide them with input that is not only comprehensible, but it's like it's tailored to them. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I want you to pay attention. Like the input, for example, would be like, I'm going to focus on the simple past, the regular simple past, and I'm going to highlight those forms and I'm going to stress those forms in my voice. Do you know what I mean? So it's not that you can't use a video that's in French with English subtitles. I mean, if it's the only video you can find and it's extremely relevant about the topic that you're talking about, it's not that it's prohibited to use it, but it's not preferable when we're talking about comprehensible input. Preferably, we have oral and written input in the target language that is simplified enough for our students to be able to understand it. That would be the response.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so what things do we have? Let's go back to Jenny's original question. What things do we have control over in the classroom that can have some type of impact on students' anxiety levels? Anxiety, by the way, is the way we pronounce it, right? Anxiety. Okay. What do we do in the classroom that could influence their anxiety levels?
For example, you say today, this year, you're gonna learn simple present, but next year you're gonna learn something very difficult that is present perfect. So the students say, "Oh my gosh, English is very difficult," and they don't want to learn anything.
Okay. What else?
Probably control our behavior, because sometimes we're kind of angry and go to the classes in that way, and some students, and probably most of them, get scared, and that's why they don't hate English, but they hate the teacher sometimes.
Right. Yes. What else?
Could be also to provide like inappropriate error correction with your students.
If you make fun of your students, or you interrupt your students, or you scold your students, right? Like if you say, no, that's wrong. Oh my gosh, you did it again. You know, this is obviously going to raise their level of anxiety. Anything else? Threatening them?
When we only let them know, we only let them know the errors and not their achievements.
Okay, right. They could become discouraged. threatening them, like if you guys don't pay attention, you're going to have a test tomorrow. That could raise their anxiety level, right? These types of tactics that we use to get students to pay attention.
But not usually the next day, because sometimes the teacher get mad and they say, okay,
you're gonna have a
paper and a pen, and in that
right
moment
now.
you have a test. So,
yeah, that's a possibility. Yes. Any other factors you guys can think of that would affect their anxiety?
When you just teach them just grammar.
Okay, just grammar, yeah. That could also stress them out. Anything else?
Even the environment, at this moment that we have in these virtual classes, some students don't like to activate their cameras because they are kind of afraid some of others can make stickers or something about that, so they are kind of stressed.
Good.
Being very strict with them also can be.
Being very strict with them, having negative attitudes, being mean.
Exactly.
That, right? Yeah. Good. Anything else you could think of? Okay. Yeah, we do. We definitely have a big influence on these types of things. Okay, so we have to be very careful. I want to share with you guys part of a presentation that I did for Equatisol. I don't know if you guys know Equatisol, like the organization. Okay, well, it's an organization of teachers of Ecuador that focus on language teaching, obviously teaching of English, right? And they asked me to do a presentation on a topic, so I chose the affective filter. So I just want to share with you guys a couple of things that we can do to assess the affective filter in our students and also to help lower the affective filter, right? So I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I do want to start with this part right here with Dr. Krashen, right? So you can see here, this is a direct quote from Dr. Krashen. You can see on the screen, right? Everybody see the screen? Yes. Okay. Slilma, would you mind please reading this out loud to us, this quote from Dr. Krashen?
The best methods are therefore those that supply comprehensible input in low anxiety situations, containing messages that students really want to hear. These methods do not force early production in the second language, but allow the students to produce when they are ready, recognizing that improvement comes from supplying communicative and comprehensible input and not from forcing and correcting production.
Okay, so this is something that we didn't really mention that raises their anxiety, is forcing them to produce the language too early. If they're not ready, meaning linguistically ready to produce the language, we shouldn't be forcing them to produce the language. And that's what we do a lot. Okay, talk in English, let's go. What if they're not ready? They just heard the new form today and they already have to produce it, right? So this is another factor that contributes to students' anxiety, right? That one there. Okay, what we do know then is that the lower the affective filter, the more successful acquisition. The higher the affective filter, the less successful acquisition. So normally we think high is good, right? Like high motivation, things like that. But no, what we want here is to have a low affective filter, because remember the affective filter is like a wall. Okay. Yeah. So what are the factors that make up the affective filter? Just like we saw yesterday: motivation, anxiety, stress, positive or negative previous experiences with the target language or culture. So your students come to your class with a lot of emotional baggage, right? And some of it has nothing to do with you, just their previous experiences, except you have to deal with the consequences of that, because that builds their affective filter. Yes, Miguel.
I'm sorry, could you help us expound in a bit more the previous idea, lower affective filter, more successful acquisition, please?
Sure. So if we go back, okay. The lower the affective filter, the more successful acquisition. Why? Think of this as a wall. What can I use as a visual aid here? I'll use this little thing here. Okay. Think of this as a wall. The affective filter is a wall in your brain, right? That builds up like this, okay? So if I have a wall right here, I have a high affective filter. You can see it. I'm getting blurry, but that's okay. Okay. Yeah. So what happens? My teacher can give me all the comprehensible input in the world, but this comprehensible input keeps hitting this wall, right? And it's like, it bounces off the wall, the English, right? Because I have these psychological factors that are blocking it. I'm not allowing the language to come in because I hate English, for example, okay? However, if we as teachers can help to lower that affective filter, right? And it goes down, then what happens? The comprehensible input that we provide to our students is able to penetrate their brain a lot better than when they have this big wall in front of it. Okay, so that's the idea. The lower the affective filter, the more successful the acquisition because the students' brains are open to the new language. The higher the affective filter, the less successful the acquisition because the new language bounces off this wall and doesn't go in their brain.
Okay, thanks. The thing is that the affective filter, can this happen in other subjects too, or just English is?
Yes, it can happen in other subjects too. In fact, this concept was put forth by DeLay and Burt for the first time in 1977. Krashen is the one who always gets credit for it, but originally it was not his idea. Originally, it was the idea of DeLay and Burt from 1977. But this is applicable to other subjects as well. I'm sure you guys had subjects that you hated in high school. I hated physics and chemistry and the sciences. I hated them. So my affective filter was really high, and I'm sure that I wasn't as successful in those languages because I already hated the subject. So I had already convinced myself I'm not good at this. I don't like it. Yeah, and I think you don't end up learning as well. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, let's continue. Right. So what raises or lowers the affective filter then? Well, you raise the affective filter with stressful situations at home or in the classroom, especially during the pandemic, right? Nervousness brought on by the subject itself, lack of motivation. If students are like, I don't need this, why should they learn it? Well, they're going to think, why should I be learning it? Like calculus, when we learned calculus in school, I was like, I like languages. I am never going to need calculus. And I was right until today, at least up until now, I have not needed calculus, right? So if your students don't see the need for English, their motivation is going to be very low. Bad personal experiences with what? With the culture, with maybe they don't like the United States, for example, they're anti-imperialism and all that stuff, maybe, who knows, right? Maybe they don't like their previous teachers. Yeah, I know that not everyone loves the gringos. I've experienced that, I know, which is understandable, totally understandable. Maybe it was with previous teachers that they had bad experiences, previous classes, you don't know, right? So what lowers the affective filter? The opposite, right? To have a relaxed environment where they can learn, to have motivation brought on by the teacher or seeing the usefulness of the class, to have positive personal experience, to have confidence boosters, like I'm doing the right thing, I can do this. That all helps lower that wall, break down that wall, okay? So bottom line is that we teachers have a lot of power in our hands to make or break our students' experience with and consequently acquisition of English. We have a lot of responsibility for this. Not only in the way that we teach that is more conducive to language acquisition, but also in helping them have a good attitude about this. Okay. So here's what I suggest. Yes. Yes.
Sorry, this is pretty interesting. The thing is that according to andragogy, all learners will always try to find the purpose when you're teaching something to them, especially English.
Mm-hmm.
But teenagers, however, pedagogy suggests that no matter what they don't need this, they just do, they just follow. So how is this connected to this part?
Okay.
I don't know if I can make my.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that in a moment, okay? That particular part. Okay. So how do we keep low how do we keep the affective filter low? What do we do? How do we help in this process, right? I propose three, this is just my original, idea. I propose 3 steps, right? Analyze, empathize, exercise. Analyze, determine the level of the affective filter and find the causes of high ones through observation or questions. I'll show you how to do this, okay? Empathize, put yourselves in your students' shoes. Understand that there is life beyond your classroom. It's not all about English class, right? And 3, exercise, develop a plan of action based on your student situations and put it into practice. So I'll show you what I mean about all this. Okay, so how do we assess the affective filter? How do we diagnose their affective filter? When I taught English before teaching like linguistics, when I just taught English to students at university level, I did a survey at the beginning of the semester. Well, it was a survey, but like it was a little half sheet of paper, like tell me what your name is, what do you prefer to be called, tell me something interesting about you, what's your favorite ice cream flavor, like random things, right? And then at the bottom, I put on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being a root canal. You all know what a root canal is? It's the worst experience. Una limpieza de conductos. I don't know if any of you have experienced that.
Like a COVID test?
No, yeah, like a COVID test, but inside the roots of your teeth, basically. Ugh, it's horrible. Okay, 1 being a root canal and 10 being fresh baked chocolate chip cookies. How do you feel about English? And I said, tell me why. I said, please, if you feel 1, I need you to put that on the piece of paper, please. You will help me if you do that, right? So I said, don't be afraid that I'm not going to like you because you don't like English. That's not my fault. Right? I'm not going to take it personally. So give me your honest answer. And they did. And some students put 1 and some students put 10 and some students put everything in between. Yeah. And why were some of the reasons they put 1? Because they've had horrible experiences with teachers. They've had horrible teachers of English because they hate studying grammar. That's another reason. Right? So if you can diagnose your students' affective filters to see how they are right now, you will be able to work with them better. Because if your students already have a low affective filter, then you're good. But if they have a high affective filter, then you're going to have to work on not only giving them comprehensible input, but also lowering those affective filters. And I'll give you some techniques on how to do that. Okay. So this is a good survey to start with. So like President Ronald Reagan said to Mikhail Gorbachev when they were going to destroy the Berlin Wall, right? He said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall, right? That's our job. We have to tear down that wall, that affective filter. And I think the first step in doing this is seeing your students as the humans that they are. I really believe this. A lot of times, we hear teachers say wambras mocosos and all this other stuff, right? But in the end, we're all humans. And yes, they might not have respect. And yes, they should have been educated better at home. And yes, all that stuff. But I'm totally convinced that if you see them first as humans, they will have a different treatment towards you. Right? I like this quote by John Maxwell right here that says, students don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care. And I really, really believe that. Yes, Ramiro.
One thing, Janine, here in Ecuador, I think is especially the case that the students they don't like English and maths because they have the myth before the students, the brothers or fathers, mother, some parents that they are saying all the time that they hate English, they hate maths, but they don't let them choice. I mean, I want to try this. We have here a lot of good teachers that they can change all this stuff.
Mm-hmm. So you do it. Eventually, students will start thinking by themselves. Yeah, maybe little kids are highly influenced by their parents, but you think teenagers are really only going to listen to their parents?
I don't think so, because most of the time like to act by themselves now. Some of them.
They can think for themselves. They can. We just have to give them a reason to think differently. I'm telling you, one of the main reasons why students hate English is because English is taught like math. So they hate math and they hate English. They hate English because it's a whole bunch of exercises of filling in blanks with formulas, basically, which is just like math. And they hate that. But if you suddenly give students in bachillerato the opportunity to find out more about their favorite YouTuber, present a 30-second video and talk about why they like this YouTuber, suddenly they don't hate it so much. Right? If you allow them to, for example, choose their favorite Friends episode and watch it in original version, and then talk about for 30 seconds why it's their favorite episode, what they like about it, suddenly they don't hate English so much. You know, it's about knowing how to work with them so that you reach them. I think that's the main problem why we have such negative attitudes about English. Okay, so that's the first step. So fine, my students have a high affective filter. What can I do to lower that affective filter? Here's something that helps from the beginning of class, at the very beginning, right? If you connect, this is obviously in the virtual modality. If you connect synchronously, get your students in the habit of putting one word or an emoji in the chat to say how they're doing at the beginning of each class. We can do this with subnivel media, subnivel superior, subnivel bachillerato. We can do this with all those students. Even little kids can draw emojis in a chat. Yeah. This can also be done through WhatsApp if you don't have connectivity with your students. You can also use those memes like I've showed you guys, those memes, right? That where you say like the duck, there's on a scale of duck, how are you feeling today? And they choose the picture that most corresponds to how they feel. On a scale of SpongeBob, you know, whatever. Something, but if you do this from the beginning of the class, what are you showing your students? That you care about them as humans.
Exactly, that I'm caring about them.
Mm-hmm. That you care about them as humans. Or you can say, for example, okay, guys, let's pick a color. Everybody pick a color to describe how you are today. What color best describes you today? Yellow, navy blue,
Red.
gray, red, right? And then you could see like some people might put some interesting colors like, I don't know, hot orange or something. I'm like, well, okay, why did you choose hot orange? How does that describe you today? You know, I think that really helps. Okay, so that's a good way to start a class. Yeah. Obviously, we have to motivate them. And how do we motivate them? Using games, which I'm sure you guys have used, right? Online games or in class games, different types of games I'm sure you've played. Music is a big motivator for students, especially in bachillerato, right? So you can use YouTube karaoke, you can use lyricstraining.com. I don't know if any of you have worked with lyrics training, but it's where the students have to type in the missing words in the lyrics. Sure. So they have fun doing that, right? Mm-hmm. Use humor. Sitcoms, comics, your own sense of humor. Humor brings down a lot of the anxiety in the classroom. For example, when I used to hear my students speaking mostly Spanish and I wanted them to use more English because they can. They were 6th level in university, so they can speak more English than they were speaking. And so I would hear them speaking Spanish and by then they would know my sarcastic sense of humor. So I would say, guys, whoa, your Spanish, it sounds like native speakers. It's incredible. You speak awesome Spanish. How's your English? And they're like, but they know that I'm just being sarcastic and playing with them, but it draws their attention to the fact that they're speaking a lot of Spanish. And so like that kind of, like lighthearted humor and sarcasm and stuff really takes you a long way, I think, with students. And of course, realia. Real life language, real life stuff that they can relate to much better than they can verb charts, right? All of these are good techniques to motivate them. Connect with them on a personal level, right? This is a challenge even in non-COVID times, but find something you have in common or remember a special detail about every student. So let's say that a student told you last week or this week, let's say today your student says, oh, on Saturday, my dog has to have an operation. Oh, what's your dog's name? Lucas. Me invento, I don't know. Okay, nice. Okay, well, I hope he does okay. I hope everything is okay. Yeah, thank you, teacher. Okay. Monday comes, you say, Maria, how's Lucas? How was the operation? Right? And the student's like, oh, my English teacher remembered that my dog had to have an operation this weekend. Those little things. I mean, think about how you feel when somebody remembers that, let alone a child. Yeah. So I think these are really important techniques. Again, care for their whole person, protect their integrity. Don't embarrass them when you do error corrections. Be careful of how you correct those errors, right? Use we as often as possible as a collective term. Guys, we need to work on our pronunciation a little bit, okay? So we can sound a little bit more like English and less like Spanish. So let's work on this. Let's work together. We, let's, those kinds of things, right? Reserve constructive criticism for private conversation. Remember that there is probably something behind the inappropriate behavior. If there's a child that's not acting appropriately in your classroom, there's probably a reason for it, because they're not getting attention at home, because there's something wrong at home, because a lot of things, and I mean, we're not psychologists and that's not our job, but I think we need to try to look at the why behind things. If you're going to criticize a student, have you guys heard of the sandwich theory? The sandwich theory? Anybody?
No, no.
Is it that you have to mention first positive things, then you mention whatever you want to criticize, and finally you end up saying again positive things?
Exactly, Edwin. Thank you. Yes. So you start out with something positive you like about the student and their performance. The negative you put in the middle of the sandwich, and you finish with something positive. This way, the student hearing something positive is more open to receiving the criticism. They receive the criticism from you, but you finish and you leave them with something positive. Yeah, this is very effective. So let's say that you want to precisely tell a student that their pronunciation is horrible, basically, right? You could say, for example, okay, fulano. So, you know, I really liked how you were participating a lot in class today. You were very active in class. That was awesome. Good job. We need to work a little bit with your pronunciation though, okay? We need to try to work some of those sounds a little bit better, because some of the sounds are not quite right yet, okay? So we need to work on that together, yeah? But your ideas are so creative. I really like them. I really, really like your ideas. Thank you. You see how that works? So this also helps to protect their self-esteem, not increase their anxiety, keep their motivation high. And all of this contributes to a lower affective filter, which is what we want, right? Back to your original question, Miguel, to finish this particular topic on affect. We have to help our students to see the purpose of English. In order to do that, you have to know your students. Okay, the reality is that not all of our students are going to college. Not all of our students are going to college. So to say something to our students like, you're going to need English in college to read articles, or you're going to need English in the professional world when you're a professional. And if our students don't go to college, what do they care about that, right? So it's not only about college applications of it. Yes, that's part of it. But let's say that we're teaching in a rural indigenous community, right? What can our students use English for in a rural indigenous community? Well, tourism was becoming really popular in Ecuador, and I'm sure it will again very soon, right? A lot of foreign tourists in Ecuador. What is the lingua franca? English. The tourists love to visit indigenous communities. As a gringa, I can say we love that kind of stuff. We love seeing indigenous communities and culture, right? So what if our students could be the ones to show other people their communities, to take them on tours, to sell their products to tourists, to make money for their families, right? So that would be another application for English. Students who love to travel, students who love, for example, like back to the series Friends, being able to watch it in original version. Students who love Maroon 5 and listening to the music, or what is the other one that was really popular recently? I can't think of his name right now. whatever, any English speaking singer. If they love music, if they love watching movies, they love anime, or I don't know, anime is usually not in English, but something that's in English, they can do it in the original version, right? So we really need to know our students. The video games, online video games are like the big thing for bachillerato, right? They're always playing Among Us and all these other Call of Duty or Fortnite or whatever, right? And how do they communicate in those video games if they're not playing with their friends directly? In English. Everybody communicates in English on those games when you're playing internationally.
But they learn the
So
bad words.
that's how they learn the bad words, and bad words are part of language, you know? So whatever motivates them, you guys need to find out what motivates them in everyday life and apply English to that. Not just about professionals and you know, traveling the world and in speaking in English at business meetings. That's not everybody's reality. Right? So we need to know our students' reality and apply English to that. Okay? Yeah. Any questions on this? No? Okay, so those are just some suggestions on what you can do to help lower the affective filter in your students. Yeah. But I mean, I think this is like, not everybody believes in the affective filter. Honestly, not all teachers, not all language teachers believe in the affective filter, but I believe in it 110%. Absolutely. Motivation is a huge factor in acquisition. I know people who lived years and years and years in the United States and never learned a word of English because they did not want to. You can be surrounded by English and not learn it. Just like you can be surrounded by English and learn it fluently. It's all about motivation, all about that affective filter. So I think it's really important to address it. Okay. All right, let's continue for a little bit more and then we'll take a break. So moving on, Ramiro, I don't know if you want to start talking about age differences. Maybe we'll do your part of the presentation and we'll take a break because this is two of you, right? Or I don't know if Ramiro starts. Who starts?
First start Melanie.
Yeah, Melanie. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're going to talk about age difference, and as we already heard about this, the critical period hypothesis, it is a limited developmental to acquire a language. It provides the where in this part of the ages it disappears. It explains that this part is after the puberty. The languages, so that the languages need to be learned and taught. And this critical period predicts discontinuity, and it is abruptly. It says that, for example, there is an age-related point beyond which it is most difficult or impossible to learn a second language to the same degree as native speakers of that language. On the other hand, we have sensitive period hypothesis. It is an optimal time during development for learning. It has a gradual in its endpoint. It has flexibility in language acquisition and predicts sensitivity, where the learner, it is optimal to learn this language. Referring to the speed of learning, in most of the study, the objective was to demonstrate the mastery on morphological and syntactic rules. That's why the advantages were for young adults and the disadvantage were for young children. However, in young adults, it can find that short life tasks were only the way that adults can get the knowledge. In addition, there were a naturalist acquisition of Dutch where 3 groups of English speakers, children, adolescents, and adults, found that adults and adolescents outperformed children on tests given after 3 months of residence in the Netherlands. But after 10 months, the children had improved the most measures. According to native like accent, it encounters the motor skills and the articularity, which are the articulatory habits and the perception of phonetic categories. In evidence, in different studies, the individuals that do not achieve a native-like accent in a second language unless they are exposed to it at an early age. The language skill in older learners seem to atrophy very quickly in phonology, especially in suprasegmental phonology, which is intonation, stress, rhythm. They do learn the language, but later they forget. And older individuals do not have hope to achieve a native accent. Referring to syntax, there were a study in which the target population was from 3 to 39 years old, and the researchers want to investigate learners' proficiency based on different ages of arrival in the country of the second language. As you can see in the first image, young learners generally, children demonstrate that syntactic knowledge was linearly related to age of arrival. But in the case of young learners, which ages are from 17 to 39, there were no relationship and they generally perform poorly. As a conclusion, these studies and others suggest that there is a critical period for acquisition and that learners' capabilities for acquiring the syntax of a second language decline with age. Besides, some researchers consider another variables, which are length of stay and gender, where female perform better than male, and a specific aspect of universal grammar, which decrease in performance between 14 to 16, where the critical period has been evidenced. The intuitions about sentences. Native speakers and non-native speakers have different intuitions. Co-authors investigated that non-native speakers have this difference when they even if they produce the same structures. Extensive in interviews, they investigate native and near-native speakers of French, where they are in the same level of language use and proficiency. The two groups have divergent interpretation, judgment, and basic grammatical contrast. In this case, they analyzed the grammatical contrast, which is the two past tenses in French, which are imparfait and passé composé, the third person pronouns il and se, and the placement of the adjective before and after the noun. There exists an evidence between the language used and underlying grammars. Now we are going to watch a video to learn about what's the best age to learn a second language.
Gemcho, that means how are you in the Indian language Gujarati. I understand it fluently, but I don't remember learning it at all. So what the heck happened? Hey guys, what's up? I'm Sapna here for D News. Learning a second language is technically referred to as second language acquisition. That's because acquisition and learning are not quite the same. Acquiring a second language is a subconscious process, but learning a second language is a conscious process based on formal instruction. Both are important. In 1967, linguist and neuroscientist Eric Lenenberg popularized the critical period hypothesis. It's a theory that proposed the best age range to acquire a new language. Lenenberg said the critical period was age 2 to 13. That's around the age you reach puberty. Now, this age range is debated by language experts, and today they prefer to call it the sensitive period instead of the critical period. That's because it's not so critical that you learn a language during that time period only. It's actually never too late. But research shows there are advantages to starting early, and here's why. Kids' brains are way better than adults when it comes to learning because of their plasticity. Their brains are just better at creating new neural pathways. It does that through the creation of new synapses, the connective junctions where one neuron talks to another using electrical and chemical signals. Shortly after birth, synapses form at a rate that's faster than any other time period in our lives. It's known as the exuberant period, where a young brain can create up to 2 million synapses every second. The number of synapses you have peaks between the ages of 4 to 8, but your brain still has a lot of plasticity until puberty. That is why exposure to language at an early age makes such a big difference. Now, although Lenenberg's critical period hypothesis states that the ideal window to acquire a language is age 2 to 13, synapses in the brain's cortex actually start forming much earlier than that, during the second trimester of pregnancy. And there's pretty convincing research that shows language development starts before a baby's even born, so it's probably never too soon for a pregnant mother to speak to her baby. And if you're past puberty, don't worry, it's not too late either. So yeah, kids' brains are more adaptable and better at making new brain connections, but adult brains are better at focusing and better at complex thought processes. In fact, adults are faster at learning a new language. So although kids are better at subconsciously acquiring a new language, adults may be better at conscious, systematic learning. And your brain is not the only thing that matters. There are external factors like who's teaching you the language, and are you around native speakers of that language? And there are internal factors like personality. If you're outgoing, you're more likely to practice and not be so afraid to make mistakes. And then there's motivation. If you enjoy learning a language, or if you really want to communicate with a hot new boyfriend or girlfriend, it sounds cheesy, but studies show you'll be more successful. There is a catch to learning a new language as an adult. The research shows you're probably not going to nail an authentic accent. No matter how hard you try, you're probably going to sound like a foreigner. But that's okay, because did you know that being bilingual could make you smarter? Trace and Alice explain in this video.
Turns out those who spoke 2 languages or more had better cognitive abilities than what was expected based on the intelligence test they took when they were kids. Now, what's interesting is that even the participants who had learned a second language after the age of 18 had way better results.
Do you speak a second language, or a third or a fourth? If so, how'd you learn it? And do you have any advice on what worked and what? Gemcho, that means how are you in the
Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, teacher, good afternoon, partners. I'm going to keep talking about the age differences. Patowski in 1880 talked about the Conrad phenomenon. He called it this because after Joseph Conrad analysis, he was a native Polish who learned English at the age of 18, and he became one of the greatest English novelists. The writing style of someone who grew around many non-native speakers, this called the attention of Patowski because he was living with French, German, Russian, and English people around him, and he got a really good acquired writing style. He also, about the speaking level of his English, he had a native like, but he has a little bit of his color of the Polish accent because English was his third language. Next one, please. About morphosyntaxis, the case in 2000, he made a study in Hungarian learners. They arrived to United States from different ages, and they divide in 2 structures, and they say easy structures and difficult structures. Examples of easy structures are word order in simple sentences and pronoun gender. And examples of difficult structures are articles and subcategorization features. After that, he ties these to explicit and implicit learning, claiming that younger learners have intact the ability for implicit and explicit learning, different adults have lost their ability to learn implicitly. He said that adults necessarily, no, still then, yeah, no, back. Yeah, he said that the adults necessarily learn largely explicitly. As a result, adults show an initial advantage because of the shortcuts provided by the explicit shortcut. Children, on the other hand, cannot use shortcuts to the representation of structure, but eventually reach full native speaker competence through long-term implicit learning from massive input. Next, please. After summarizing the results, the evidence indicates that young children are more likely to attain native-like proficiency in a second language than are teenagers or adults. Different adults often learn certain parts of a new language more quickly. The evidence is more solid for an advantage for children in the acquisition of phonology, although there is some support for advantage in other areas of language as well. About the results, first we have both the initial rate of acquisition and the ultimate level of attainment depend in part of the age at which learning begins. Second, there are sensitive periods governing language development. First or second, during which the acquisition of different linguistic abilities is successful and after which it is irregular and incomplete. Third, the age-related loss in ability accumulated, affecting first one linguistic domain and then another and is not limited to phonology. And finally, the deterioration in some individuals begins as early as age 6, not at puberty as is often claimed. Next, please. About the sensitive period, we have some characteristics that they mention. First, there are social physiological reasons for why adults learn language less readily than children do. There are many different versions of this hypothesis. Some suggest that adults do not want to give up the sense of identity their accent provides. Another study suggests that adults are unwilling to surrender their ego to the extent required to adopt a new language. Second, there are cognitive factors responsible for the inability of adults to learn successfully. Adults have greater cognitive abilities than children. Third, there are neurological changes that prevent adults from using their brains in the same way children do on language learning tasks. This is usually presented as a loss of plasticity or flexibility in the brain. And finally, children are exposed to better input for language learning. The assumption here is that the type of modifications adults make for children provide better data about language. Next. Next. Long in 1990, he was talking about social psychological difference between children and adults. The primary difference between children and adults is in the mastery of phonology, which can hardly be due to input difference. The second one is say the adults are better at negotiating input, which should suggest better acquisition of possibilities. And finally, he mentioned that the children do not receive input divergent from native speaker speech in certain cultures. Next, please. Also, Byron in 1990, he mentioned some characteristics why the adults cannot become fluent in a second language. First, he said about loss of access to the language learning faculty. Successful language learning cannot take place after puberty because there is a loss of UG, this means universal grammar, and possibility a loss of innate learning strategies. Second, loss of neuroplasticity in the brain. As a person ages, there is a progressive lateralization of cerebral functions. The consequence of this and other cerebral changes is that the neural substance need for language learning is no longer fully available. They also mentioned the maladaptive game of processing capacity. Processing and memory capacities change as a person matures. And finally, use it, then lose it. This is especially in the adults, you know, when they have some exam or some tests, or they need to show some presentation, they just memorize that for that moment. And after that, they don't even remember what they were talking about. Next, please. Marshall and Snow, they were mentioned about critical period, and they made 3 conclusions. They said misinterpretation, a fallacy, children are fast and efficient. The reality is that children learn language slowly and effortfully. Misattribution, fallacy, language proficiency is tied to brain functioning. Reality, this may in fact turn out to be the case, but data currently in evidence cannot discern this. And misemphasis, fallacy, because there is frequent failure by adults to learn an L2 does not mean that it's impossible to do so. Reality, most adults to end short of native-like levels of proficiency, but there is often a lack of motivation, a lack of commitment of time or energy, and lack of environment support. They also mentioned that this one is not always true because they make another study and they couldn't find the successful adults who invest sufficient time and attention in second language acquisition and who benefit from high motivation and from supportive, informative L2 environment. Next, about our discussion question, according to your experience and what age do you consider that learning a foreign language is easier? Thank you, guys.
Okay. Instead of according to your experience, because it's hard to have experience and compare because like from just personal experience, what's the bottom line here? With all of this information that they just gave us, what's the bottom line? It's a lot to process, right?
Yeah. I think like the bottom line would be like you start learning when you're a teenager, right? Before like you reach that kind of puberty thing, and then like says that you start declining.
Right. So basically
So
the bottom. Yeah. Okay. So before that, the bottom line is that, like we saw yesterday or the day before, children are usually better at the acquisition of phonology, whereas adults can be better at the acquisition of morphosyntax, but because they have more experience with language in general, right? But children tend to do it in a more natural way. Adults feel like they need something that's more systematized. But in reality, we know that we can teach adults and children in the exact same way, which is with comprehensible input. And that both adults and children can acquire a language just through comprehensible input. Even though adults insist and they think they need rules, they don't. They don't. They can do it through comprehensible input. And something that we have called the language acquisition device never turns off. It functions our entire life. So just because we're past the age of puberty doesn't mean that we can't acquire a native language. There are some people who argue that it's more difficult to become native like in your fluency. That's true. That's true in most cases. That's true from what we see from most research, but that doesn't mean that you can't acquire a language. So don't get discouraged if you guys still want to learn more languages. You still have a chance. Even though
we're analyzing in another subject that the adults, they have more motivation because sometimes they are paying for their courses, for their lessons, because they need to, you know, invest money for, maybe they are going to travel to another world, to have another one capacitation, or they say, okay, you have chosen to go to United States, you need to, you know, learn new skills about the, we can say about communications, yeah?
Right.
But the program is only to be in English, so you need to have that level.
This is true, yes. Okay. So the bottom line is that there is a sensitive period that they call it, like we saw in the video, not a critical period, that people are calling it a sensitive period, right? That precisely because it doesn't mean that past that period, it's impossible to learn a new language. You still can, right? I've heard recently that the ideal age to introduce a new language, if they're not growing up bilingual, right, would be around 7 or 8 years old. 7 or 8 years old because it's before puberty, right? Yet those kids have enough foundation in their native language that it can propel them to acquire a second language. So actually, in the public school system of Ecuador, starting English in segundo de básica is just right. Believe it or not. They're doing something right. So yeah, that's good. Okay, ready to take a break? Let's take a break. Yeah, let's take a break until 6:50, and we'll continue.
Teacher, I would like to ask something, maybe.
Yes.
I don't think if my classmates are interested in this question. That's what I was waiting to this point.
Yeah, so then the rest can leave for break. That's fine. Yes.
Sure. It's kind of, I have two questions. One is like from a financial point of view, because I get these questions like a lot because I work with companies, business people, and so on and so forth. And they really just want to know how much will cost to learn English, not in terms of time or effort. They just want to translate that into money so they can do some calculations and put it in a budget and either pay themselves or prepare their personnel. What can I answer from this language acquisition perspective?
You can't answer that question. You can't answer that question because for several reasons. Like we just saw, language acquisition is an extremely long process. So what does it mean to learn English according to the people who are asking you this? What does that mean? Like, when have you learned English? Like, at what point do you consider that you've learned English? When you can pass a C1 level exam? When you can what?
They don't know.
Exactly.
They trust me on the answer.
That's exactly the point, you know, and it depends a lot on the amount of effort that the students put into it too. I mean, if they are constantly exposing themselves to English outside of the classroom, then the process can go a little bit quicker, as opposed to if they're just limited to your classroom and the things that they do in your classroom, then the process is going to go slower. So, I mean, that's impossible to put a dollar amount on how much it's going to cost them to learn English. That's impossible.
I agree, because that's what I've understood from this acquisition methodology you just presented. Yet, I mean, how do you reconcile budget needs from the people who are going to pay? Because to me, so far, I like it, yet it sounds so romantic. You know what I mean? Because I need to sell English courses. And they just want to know how much it will cost. So I just don't know how to put these two things together. And that brings me to a second question inside, sub-question. Yet, if language acquisition does not believe in standard tests, like C1 test or Cambridge tests, then you don't believe either in placement tests, do you? Because a placement test would be a standard test.
Yeah. But I mean, the thing is that obviously you have to have a way to assess their level of English, like in order to put them in an appropriate level, because if they know nothing in English, then you can't put them in a class that's meant for students that are B2 level, right? So I think that placement tests are valid to a certain extent, but again, it's like, what are our instruments used to measure? What are we really measuring? Are we measuring, like, for example, with a placement test, are we measuring explicit grammar knowledge? Are we measuring if, you know, do we give them, for example, depending on your placement test, do we give them a test that says, okay, in this section, conjugate the verb in the present perfect continuous for all of these sentences? Well, then you're not really measuring their communicative ability in the language, right? So I think, again, it's all related. You know, if you measure something that is not the real use of the language, but something formulaic, I don't know. I don't believe in that.
So just check if if this answer would be correct. So if people ask me how much it will cost, then I would have to answer first, it's necessary a placement test. And second, they can like know how much it will cost to get to a certain grammar level. But once they reach that, still they need to keep learning. So it's like two things that go together. Is it more or less that?
You can tell them also that there are several factors that enter into that calculation, that it's very difficult for you to put a specific dollar amount on that calculation because it depends on motivation of your students, right? It depends on the amount of English time that they are able to dedicate to English outside of your classroom. Like, let's say that you send them homework assignments, right?
And they don't do it.
They don't do it, or like it's, it's supposed to be like input assignments, for example, send them lots of input, watch an hour of some English news program, BBC, CNN, NBC, whatever you want, and write a reflection on your favorite news story, or the one that, something like that. If they're not exposing themselves to more English outside of your classroom hours, then it's going to take them longer. I mean, there are several factors that they need to consider there.
Well, last question. Católica University, the English Institute of Católica University, are they using this acquisition model to their...
They should be using a communicative approach in theory.
Yes, but Catholic University still sells English levels, right? So they like you pass levels, and that is still the older perspective, not the language acquisition. Am I right?
Yes, because everybody knows that in one semester you can't advance a level. It just doesn't happen. You cover what you do in one semester is you cover all of the grammar and vocabulary that corresponds to that level.
All right.
But that doesn't mean that the student actually has the communicative capabilities of that level.
So maybe for today, or for when you have an answer, I would like to know, how do you reconcile this language acquisition methodology with a system that is already working in a place, for example, like Catholic University, that also has financial needs, sort of say, right? I would love to know how it works,
Yeah.
I like it. I'm thinking of how to put this into work with my students, and I don't have the answer in the financial part, and well, that was somehow a comment, or if you can elaborate on this maybe more later.
Yeah,
that'd be awesome.
I'll see. But just to clarify, like, language acquisition is not a method or anything. It's just it's like language acquisition theory. It's a phenomenon that we talk about, right? But starting maybe tomorrow, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, depending on how much we get through, we're going to start talking about a communicative approach, and that like goes along the lines of language acquisition theory. So the real life manifestation of this in the classroom would be a communicative approach. That goes language acquisition theory.
Thank you very much. See you later.
Take a break. Okay, we ready to continue? Raul, did you have a question before the break?
No, teacher.
Yeah, because you had your hand raised, so I was just curious. Okay. Then let's continue, please. Too many things open. Hold on one second. Okay. All right, let's continue. Let's do the last presentation. So Raul, actually, if you're ready, you can go ahead.
Okay, teacher, let's see. Okay, teacher, good afternoon. Is my screen sharing? Yes, okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to talk about the aptitude with P. So what is aptitude? Aptitude is the potential for learning new knowledge or new skills. So it involves how fast or how or how your brain works when you learn new things. So after this, we can say that there are a language aptitude that it could be also defined as the potential to acquire or learn a language. So it involves all the skills and soft skills that students have when they learn a language. But in order to understand better the attitude, because it's not a well-studied topic, we have to know to measure it. So in the book, there were some examples how to measure and different components to about the aptitude. So we are going to watch a video where a teacher is explaining how an aptitude test work, and then we can have an idea, a better idea about what is aptitude. I love sharing the sound.
Also just show you the language aptitude test for beginners languages, because that one's slightly different. This is a test based on a made-up language that someone in the faculty invents a new language every year for this test, and it's trying to find out how good you are at working out the rules of how a language functions from some examples of it. So in this case here, for example, there is an introduction to the language which points out that if you're trying to work it out, you should keep an eye on the grammatical gender of words, as in ram being a male sheep versus ewe being a female sheep versus sheep being undetermined, and to use that hint to try and work something out about how.
Okay, I'm not sure if you could listen well.
Yes.
Or do you understand? Yes. So not so good. Okay, but what is the question is, what are the components or facts that involves an aptitude test? I don't know if someone can answer or write in the chat. Or may I repeat?
Maybe you want to repeat it if they couldn't hear it. Well, can you turn up the volume on the computer over there, the volume part?
Okay.
that you clicked on earlier, make sure that it's at the maximum level. Of the video itself. Go to the volume of the video. On the right side? There. Over there, but right there. Yep. Move that up to the top.
I want to also just show you the language aptitude test for beginners languages, because that one's slightly different. This is a test based on a made-up language that someone in the faculty invents a new language every year for this test, and it's trying to find out how good you are at working out the rules of how a language functions from some examples of it. So in this case here, for example, there is an introduction to the language which points out that if you're trying to work it out, you should keep an eye on the grammatical gender of words, as in ram being a male sheep versus ewe being a female sheep versus sheep being undetermined, and to use that hint to try and work something out about.
Okay, I don't know if it is a little bit clear. I don't know if someone could help me. What did you listen about? What is an aptitude test? Okay.
Did you guys understand
It was, I heard that it was a test based on native language in order to measure the language functions.
Yes, that's one of the components.
And the other component was, yes, the grammatical gender also.
Yes. So as you can notice, this is a test based on the different features of the language. Could be phonology, morphology, syntactics, semantics, and so on. So in order to understand better,
I want to also just show you the language aptitude test for beginners
to
languages.
understand better, I'm going to explain a little bit more about the components or what is that. So one author, there were two authors that explained attitude, relate the aptitude with intelligence. So it is he described that the aptitude is related to the selective encoding. This is related to the production process, because at this stage we can distinguish between more and less relevant information. So it happens in our minds when we're thinking about the words, and we have this bunch of words, and we remember the most relevant before than the last one, than the less relevant. Also, attitude is related with the accidental encoding, which means that someone needs understand the words or the meaning, and go beyond from this meaning. He can use the word in the with the other functions, with other meanings, with other contexts. So it is an accidental encoding that is another thing related to aptitude. Also, we have the selective comparison. This is somehow an ability to determine the relevance of an information for a current task. This could be observed from the solve problem task, because we can choose different information. We can think if we can solve better the task by using the information, all the information or knowledge that is inside our mind. So this is the selective comparison. Also, the aptitude is related to the selective transfer. This means that applying the coded or inferred rules in new contexts or task. This means that we can use a word or generalize information rules from a word. When we learn a new word or we learn a new sentence, we can apply what we learn in other contexts. We can create also other sentences, so something similar to the last one we learned. And also the aptitude is related with selective combination. That means when you go beyond in the I don't know how to say, in the knowledge triangle, it means that when you try to analyze, to synthesize, and to create new knowledge, so the selective combination could be the highest step of the knowledge pyramids. So we can synthesize various bits of information gathered through selective and accidental encoding. So first we can analyze simple words or phrases from our background. We can select them and we can use the background that, or the other meanings, other context that the words or the phrase involves. So this is a selective combination. So in order to sum up the aptitude, we have 4 components of the aptitude that were defined for a teacher in a test of aptitude. So the first ability is the phonemic coding. It means the discrimination of foreign sounds and encoding them to use later. So this is related also with the memory. Because when we learn new sounds, we learn new words, and we have to encode them and save in our memory in order to use or to create new knowledge later. Also, we have the grammatical sensitivity. This is another ability of aptitude. That it means that we use practical, not the theory. We don't learn how to form or what is the meaning of a present continuous or present perfect, but we know that how to use these tenses in other sentences or in other examples. So this is related to discern the use of words in sentences and their functions. So practically. Also, another ability is the inductive language learning that refers to infer rules or generalization. As I said before, this is an special ability. We have some examples when we learn, for example, numbers. We have some at the beginning, the teens. We know that there is a rule in order to form all the teens with the teen termination or the teens numbers. From the numbers, simple numbers, 1, 2, 3, 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we can form the teens. Also, we have the memory and learning. This means that make and recall associations between words or phrases in a native and a second language. It is referring to the knowledge that we have in the first language is when it's useful to use in the second language, and it helps to learn or to improve the second language better by making comparisons of meaning of sentences or functions. So this is a memory and learning ability related to aptitude. So in order to finish, I would like to share you with some examples that are related to the components and the things, the facts that aptitude involves. For example, we have questions like number learning that measures the associative memory. So how the students infer the rules and generalize them. So the example here is how to form complex numbers, tens, and hundreds from simple ones. So when we learn numbers, we learn just the simples, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we can form the hundreds, the tens, and the ones. With examples like this, we can divide. We know 2, 7, 1, and we can divide into hundreds, 70, and 1. So we can continue doing this same exercise with others, but obviously we don't know the language. So this is for beginners. Here is another example. I would like you to help me. You have to read the 2 sentences and decide which of the underlined words in the second sentence fulfills the same function as the underlined word in the first sentence. So we can read it and choose the words that best fit in this first sentence. I know if someone could help me.
Start a new life.
Yeah, okay, one option could be, I think I'm too young to start a new life. Yes, could be have the same meaning, no? This is the purpose. Another option?
Feel ready.
To feel ready. I don't know, is this sentence could have a complete sentence. I think I am too young to feel ready.
Get married.
To get married.
Yes, to get married. So the best options are to get married or to start a new life. So an aptitude, these examples can measure how fast you can relate the grammar functions between different examples, how you can infer, and how you can use other words in other contexts. Also, I have another better example that is a little bit more complete, As you can notice, this is the example of the teacher of Oxford. They use this kind of tests in order to start the degree. So as the teacher says, we have an artificial language. This means that it is an invented language in order to study how good you are or how high is your aptitude to learn a language. So this is Piña, an artificial language. That is a little bit common to English because the Piña has fixed words as order. That means that the sentences have subject, noun, verb, preposition, and so on. But the Piña does not have determiners. They don't have determiners, the and a. So knowing these facts, we have to find the meaning of these sentences in Piña, translate to English. So I don't know if someone could help me. You have here some examples, some translations. Here is the Piña language, and here is the English. So we have to find the meaning of these sentences after reading this. One clue in order to find the meaning of these words is looking for these words here and the similar words there and their translation. So we can continue looking for the meaning of this sentence.
Is not the ball sees the hen?
The owl sees the hen. Yeah, something like that. We have Bokoi is like a rooster, and Bokayagi is like the hen, and Bukel is like the bird sings. So we can see that the answer, somehow the answer could be the rooster is the hen. This test, we have to encode new words that we don't know. Even we don't know how to pronounce them. We don't know the accents. We don't know if this is a verb or not. So we are relating also the grammatical functions. We are encoding different and new knowledge, and we're creating new words in new contexts. So this is how we can measure aptitude in order to know how good is someone to learn a new language. So in order to finish, I would like to ask you, taking in mind that there are different factors that could help to success in language acquisition, like motivation, like nature approach, like the language acquisition theory. Do you think that to learn a second language requires special skills or learning aptitudes? Special learning aptitude? Why? Is helpful aptitude?
I don't think you need anything special. I mean, because all of us, we have learned L1, L2. But I do think that some people could have problems if they don't have standard skills. So some learning impediments, let's say. That would be my comment.
Yeah, okay. Is aptitude as important as motivation as other factors that we have learned?
Can you repeat the question?
Is aptitude as important as other factors that we have learned, like motivation, like age, like affective filter?
I think it's important, but maybe motivation or other kind of aspects in the context are more important to actually learn, because if you are motivated, even if you don't have like the best aptitude, you could, I don't know, achieve your goal.
Okay, here's a question. Do you think language teaching, language learning is similar to sports in that, for example, Messi, who is arguably the greatest soccer player of all time? You guys can make that decision, not me, right? But he's a good soccer player, right? How much of that was he born with? And how much of that was he able to develop? And can we relate language acquisition to the same type of situation? Is it similar to sports? Can you develop a language like you can develop sports? Are you born with that talent? What?
I think you can develop, because as Raul said, you need to develop the potential to learn something or acquire the language.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I think like if you put enough effort like in anything, like you can develop it. Like it will take more time for sure, depending like your abilities and your motivation itself. But like if you're kind of disciplined over time, you will develop, and you will reach a point where like you're comfortable with it.
Okay. Okay. So here's the thing. In the 1990s, this was a big thing. Aptitude was a big thing. We're like, that's it. We're going to devise these tests. Like I sent you guys some sample items from the MLAT, which is a very popular test for language aptitude, which has been a very popular test. And just recently, in the last couple years, now linguists are saying, actually, aptitude doesn't really matter. And if you think about it, that's logical, because all of you are native Spanish speakers and you have the same abilities in your language. None of you were necessarily more apt to becoming a native Spanish speaker than anyone else. Yes, some of you spoke your first word later than others. Some of you were able to speak full sentences earlier than others. Fine. But right now, there's no difference between all of you. Some of you might have greater vocabularies, fine, but you're all native speakers. You all dominate the morphosyntax of your language. You all have a complete lexicon. You all speak Spanish as native speakers. So why are we talking about aptitude with language acquisition? Stephen Krashen would say, given the right circumstances, we are all gifted learners. In other words, if we all have low affective filters, which is motivation, not aptitude, right? Motivation and anxiety, all that stuff. If we have low affective filters and we have comprehensible input, we are all capable of acquiring a language equally. Raul.
Yes, teacher. This was my question, because reading my part, I didn't understand well. What is the function of this aptitude test? And I don't know if you can correct me. When we make these aptitude tests, we can look for the weakness and the strengths of students in order to place them in instructional practice or instructional course.
No. The idea of an aptitude test is simply to predict how well you will do at learning a foreign language. That's what it is. That's the function. How much of an aptitude do you have for languages, right? Can you figure out patterns of languages? If you look at the sample items that I sent you guys, you'll see some examples. Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know how reliable this is, how accurate this is, how, you know, nowadays the school of thought is going in, it's like a pendulum, right? in the 90s, we were over here. Now we're going back this way over here to say aptitude really isn't a big factor in language acquisition, that there are other factors that are more important, like motivation.
Yes, so teacher, as I was thinking before with the question of Eric, I can say that aptitude test can help us to know or have a vague idea of how long does a person will take to learn or acquire a second language.
Not how long. We can't tell how long from an aptitude test. We can tell how much aptitude they have, how gifted are they for learning languages. That's the purpose of an aptitude test. The more gifted you are, the better you'll be able to acquire a language, supposedly. The more aptitude you have for languages, the better you will be able to acquire a language. The more you'll do it easily. The more I don't know what you would call it. The easier you'd be able to do it, right? But I just wanted to mention that a lot of linguists are discrediting this. They're saying, nope, this is not what we thought it was. Aptitude does not have the impact that we thought it did. Yeah. So that's something to think about. You can have your own beliefs based on, different research and different findings and things, but that's what linguists are saying now, that aptitude really doesn't matter. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions on aptitude? Okay. So then let's now actually start watching the video from Dr. Crush. Okay. I would like you guys to be a little bit proactive when we watch this video, in that I would like you to comment in the chat on some things. Maybe you'll hear him say something that surprises you, right? Or you'll hear him say something that you think is super interesting or whatever, or say, oh my gosh, it's totally true, or I never thought that, something, but be a little bit like, let's have kind of like a discussion as we're watching this through the chat, right? Not just be passive watchers of this video. If you've never heard Dr. Krashen speak before, he is very anecdotal, which means he likes to tell stories, anecdotes, right? And that's part of what makes him entertaining as a speaker. Even though he's 80 years old, he's quite entertaining because he tells stories and things. And sometimes he goes off on tangents a little bit, and it takes him a while to come back to the main point, but he says a lot of really important stuff here. Okay. So I would like to watch it with you. There are some parts that I might skip over a little bit just because he's not that relevant about certain things, but all right, let me load this for you first. Hold on.
Janine, sorry, I'm sure there must be papers that support his ideas, because I heard him in the video that you sent us when he was at PUSE, and he said writing doesn't improve writing, reading does. But I haven't found anything reliable on the internet.
Okay.
So I'm sure that there must be some kind of source where I can find his.
Yes. Have you checked out, actually, are you the only one who's watched this? Has anyone else watched this video? Dr. Krashen's video from the PUSE?
I would just watch the first part because it was too much information. I got
You
tired.
just watched the first part?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because I don't want to, if other people have seen it, then I don't want to share it together, because that would make no sense. The rest of you haven't seen it? No? Okay, that's fine. That's totally fine. I just want to make sure. Yeah, you know what? Look up Beniko Mason. She's done a lot of research on storytelling. Beniko Mason. Let me see if I can find, I think it's benikomason.net. Let me check. Yes, here, you'll probably find information and actual empirical studies on this topic right here on this website. Let me get it to answer your question so you can take a look at that. Okay. Sorry, you guys have to see my silly little face in this video, but okay. We're ready to get started. First of all, I would like to introduce our extremely special guest that we have today. This is such an honor. I can't even begin to tell you. I remember hearing all about you in Dr. Van Patten's seminars in my graduate studies at University of Illinois. You are an idol. So I'm going to introduce you, and then the floor or the screen or the camera is yours, okay? Dr. Stephen Krashen was born and raised in Chicago, Illinois. Like me, this is why we have this beautiful background here. He holds a PhD in linguistics from UCLA and is currently an emeritus professor of education at the University of Southern California. His contributions to the field of linguistics and language education spans over 4 decades. He has written more than 525 articles and books in the fields of bilingual education, neurolinguistics, second language acquisition, and literacy. He has received several awards, including the Mildenberger Award for his book, Second Language Acquisition and Second Language Learning, the Pimsleur Award for the Best Published Article in 1985, the Dorothy C. McKenzie Award for Distinguished Contribution to the Field of Children's Literature, a Doctorate of Humane Letters awarded by Lewis and Clark College, Portland, 2011, and the Kenneth S. Goodman in Defense of Good Teaching Award, College of Education, University of Arizona, 2019. He continues to work actively in the field, focusing on the importance of reading in language acquisition and on bilingual education. He now offers many of his groundbreaking publications, as well as recent works for free on his webpage, sdkrashen.com. In short, Dr. Krashen is to language acquisition what Albert Einstein is to physics. He's a rock star, and it is such an incredible honor to have you with us today, Dr. Krashen.
Wow, I'm impressed. That was amazing. Thank you. I didn't realize all those things. I would like you also to notice that Jenny Matz pronounced the word of the city we come from as Chicago and not Chicago. Students of sociolinguistics understand that there is what we call an isogloss around the city of Chicago. So if you say Chicago, we know you're from somewhere else. So we are paisanos, okay? This is fantastic. What I'd like to do today is give you a brief history of my work, and I'd like to start, and my philosophy these days, and I'd like to start with a story. Actually, true story. Oh gosh, I forgot. Let me tell you, one of my colleagues is here. We have another guest. I'm so happy that you invite.
Yeah, let me just skip this part a little bit.
The piano. And I'm trying to improve my languages. One of the things it's important for researchers is to be always involved with trying to acquire other languages. My best one is German. I was a student in Austria for a long time ago, and it was a very good experience. After that is French. That's number 3. Then after that is Spanish, and I'll tell you about that. And then there's Hebrew and Amharic, the language of Ethiopia, and most recently Mandarin, which is a lot of fun. Let me tell you what's going on with Spanish. I am exactly intermediate. Intermediate means I can have conversations. I can understand a lot of what people say, but not everything. I can understand some what we call authentic books. I just discovered Isabella Allende a year ago. Oh my goodness. So I've been following the advice of my colleague, Beniko Mason, who until recently taught English as a foreign language in Japan. She just retired. And for intermediate and on up, she invented what I think is a very interesting method. It's called guided self-selected reading. You read lots and lots of very, very easy books. Not the hard stuff where you have to struggle, but at your level or below. So I've been reading what are called graded readers in Spanish. I'll tell you my 2 favorite authors. Adriana Ramirez. So if you do Spanish as a second language, I love her stuff. And the other one, Bill Van Patten. You just heard his name. Bill Van Patten is an
I took my courses with him. That's why I mentioned him, and he talks about his books, and he talks about Adriana Ramirez and her books. So we're going to skip this part a little bit.
Oh no, he looks over at me, he says, I'm with patient, deeply moving. And I see now why he's so close to his sister and so loyal to him. So that's Bill Van Patten. Good story, really interesting guy. Let me tell you about my experiences at home, though, in the quarantine. And this is a good introduction to the talk. I've been working on Spanish, and I've been doing what Benico Mason says, reading lots and lots of easy things. Adriana Ramirez and Bill Van Patten and other authors. Once a week, I take a test. I go out to one of the supermarkets. This supermarket has a special time, like 7 in the morning, where you can go there if you're an old person, old people only, which is very good because, as you know, older people are in greater danger from the coronavirus. The first time I went to, I bought my stuff over to the counter where I would be charged. And the guy who was helping me, I saw his name tag, his name was Fidel. So I assumed correctly that he was from Mexico and that he spoke Spanish. So I attempted to speak to him in Spanish. And as is generally the case, wanting to be polite, he answered in English. I then said, "Tú puedes ayudarme. Mi meta es hablar español como ustedes. Por favor, hablamos español." That warmed his heart. We have been speaking Spanish once a week, Friday mornings when I check out. Now, that means I'm not speaking very much Spanish. I'm only speaking 2 minutes a week at the most. I know I'm improving because Fidel speaks to me more rapidly, more complicated, more sophisticated topics, and more jokes, okay? There's a lot of chalar, okay? It's really fun. It's coming from input, not from output, which is a major message that I have today. So I've been very impressed. I've been occasionally having conversations. Dr. Ashtari is my witness here. We had a talk with Viviana Hall, who's a native speaker of Spanish last week. And she and I spoke Spanish, and she said, "Steve, you're getting better. How impressive." It's not from talking. It's from doing all of this easy reading. In our classes, like your ESL classes, you have a reader, you have a book, grammar, and there's a little story, and the story gets harder much too quickly because they try to push in all the new grammar, all the new vocabularies, and within 5 weeks, everybody's lost. This is so much more comfortable. I'm getting all new stuff and I'm getting old stuff and stuff that's not in the list. It is absolutely working. Well, let me tell you what I've been doing the last 45, 50 years and how our progress has been. The last 50 years, I have been collecting a series of hypotheses and getting evidence for them. These are hypotheses. I'm not going to tell you I think they're right. I suspect that they are, but they're hypotheses. And there could be a counter evidence the next day. But they seem quite plausible, and there is good evidence for them. The first one is something some of you have heard before. It's called the acquisition learning hypothesis. And this says we have 2 different ways of getting better in other languages. We can acquire language and we can learn language, and they're different. Acquisition, we sometimes call the natural way, and a synonym for acquisition is picking up a language. I've been reading all these stories and I'm picking up some Spanish. That means it's happening without my knowing it. I'm not aware that I'm improving, but Fidel has noticed it and Viviana has noticed it. I'm surprised and pleased. When you're acquiring, you don't know you're acquiring. That's the interesting part. It's stored in our brains subconsciously. And if we have time a little later, I'll give some evidence for this very exciting hypothesis. The language acquisition device never shuts off. We can do it from the moment we're little kids till we're old, like me. It never, ever stops. There is no sudden critical period where you can't acquire a language anymore. The language acquisition device, according to Noam Chomsky, is a mental organ, like the liver, like the kidneys. You can't stop your kidneys from working. Even by thinking about it, they work anyway. The language acquisition device is like that. I'll have more to say about that. The other process is learning. Learning is knowing about language. This is what we did in school, learning the rules. And we all know that knowing the rule does not mean you can use it. Now it's time for a true confession. As you have noticed, yo puedo hablar español un poquito. No es perfecto, pero yo puedo comunicar. I know the rules very well. I have a PhD in grammar. I have learned the ser estar distinction. I have not acquired it. I cannot apply this rule when I'm speaking. We'll come back to this in a little while. I think this makes it so interesting to be involved with languages yourself. Second hypothesis. We acquire, not learn, but acquire the rules of language in a predictable order. Some are early, some are in the middle, some are late. For example, in first language, in English, the progressive marker, John is playing the violin, is early acquired. It's also true in second language. The third person singular, I go, you go, he goes, is late acquired. For first language, there could be 6 months to a year between those two. For second language, the third person singular may never come. We all know people who speak English as a second language very, very well, but have not acquired the third person singular, kind of like ser estar for me, okay? I want to tell you about one of my friends when I was a linguistics professor at the University of Southern California. The professor whose office was across the hall, we became pretty good friends. His name was Masayoshi Shibatani, Matt Shibatani. And Matt had studied at MIT with Chomsky himself, amazing. He knew more about English grammar than anyone else I knew. And I always went to him when I had questions about English grammar. Very handy, and he was very helpful. Still, Matt Shibatani sometimes made mistakes with the third person singular. Now, when I met Matt, he was probably in his 40s. He had known that rule for 30 years, but it still was not completely acquired. Fascinating. Here are some, I think, amazing facts about the natural order hypothesis. It's about acquisition, not about learning. You can't change it. I can drill ser estar all day long, and it still will not be acquired. I have to wait until its time has come, just like good wine. It's not from simple to complicated. That's how we make our syllabi. But the brain has its own syllabus, and it's not our idea of simple to complex. The third person singular is fairly simple, but it's late acquired. The progressive tense, it's a little bit complicated if you knew all the rules, but it is acquired early. Now, the third amazing fact, the order of acquisition is not the teaching syllabus. I thought it was. In 1980, as I'm sure you recall, most of you were there, I'm sure, I gave a speech at the TESOL organization. I tell people it was standing room only because there were only 11 chairs in the room, as I remember. It's a small session. And I announced, great discovery, we have the natural order. All we have to do is teach along the order. Let's do the third person singular later. Let's do the progressive tense early. Wrong. The natural order is the result of language acquisition. If you do the right thing, we'll talk about that in a moment, they will acquire according to the natural order. It is not the teaching order, and I will argue that there is no teaching order. Don't worry about it. Things will come out okay. Let's talk about grammar, and here I would like to do some rumor control. People say all these things about me, and I will tell you that it's not true. One of the things they tell about me that's not true is that Krashen forbids grammar instruction. Never, ever teach grammar. Teach grammar, go to jail. No, that's not my position. My position is grammar is hard to learn, hard to use, hard to apply. It is very, very limited. This is the imperial we, me and my friends, have come up with several conditions that must be met if you want to successfully learn and apply grammar. These are necessary conditions, and they're quite challenging. In fact, we can never accomplish all of them, in my opinion. Number one, you have to know the rule. We don't know all the rules. Let's say you go visit Professor Chomsky. Professor Chomsky of MIT knows more about English than anyone alive. He knows more about English than anyone who has ever lived. He has done his research into universals by doing a careful analysis of English grammar, a very good research strategy. If it's a wonderful description for anything in a language, it's a candidate for universal. We don't know, teachers don't know all the rules. Even teachers who are very interested in grammar, who read books on grammar, who even write books on grammar, they don't know all the rules. Even our best students don't understand all the rules we present in class. So we can't do language through grammar. We don't know all the rules, not even close. Number two, if you want to use grammar while you're speaking, you have to be thinking about it. You have to be thinking about correctness. It's very hard to think about saying something correctly when you're in the middle of a conversation. This is kind of like patting your head and rubbing your tummy at the same time. It's kind of an unnatural thing to do. Also, if you want to apply rules while you're speaking, you have to have time. It's tough to do during conversation. Now, when are these conditions met? You know the rule, you're thinking about correctness, and you have time. Only in one condition, in my opinion, when you're taking a grammar test. It's the only time you have a chance of satisfying these rules. We have found in our research back in the late 70s, early 80s, even when you give people a grammar test, as teachers know, they don't apply the rules because of these conditions. So the monitor, this use of grammar as a monitor, as an editor, is extremely, extremely limited. Okay, let's get to the big issue. How do we acquire language? If we don't get better in language through consciously learning the rules and practicing them, which is, I think, pretty hopeless, how do we do it? Let me state the hypothesis by giving you some sample language lessons. I'm going to give.
Okay, this is, I think, one of the coolest parts of his talk, this one right here, when he gives the sample language lessons, okay? I want you guys to pay attention. He's going to give 2 language lessons, okay? He's going to give 2 different, he's going to use the same language, but he's going to present 2 lessons. For the first lesson, I want everyone to do this in the chat. As you listen to the lesson, I want you to write in the chat what percentage of the lesson you understand. What percentage of the lesson you understand for lesson number 1. For lesson number 2, you're going to do the same thing. What percentage of the lesson did you understand? 0, nothing at all? 100% of it? 50%? Be honest, okay? He's going to do the percentage he's going to do the lesson in German. So if you already know German, this is not fair for you, okay? You kind of have to not participate. If you don't know German, then you can do this, okay? Got it? So when he gets to the end of lesson 1, give me the percentage, and the end of lesson 2, give me the percentage. And let's take a look at the differences, okay? Everyone ready?
Give you a couple of language lessons in a language that you've heard before. Maybe some of you have studied, 1 or 2 of you probably speak. I'll give you 2 lessons, and you can tell me which one of the 2 you like better. And this is in a language you may have heard about. Maybe some of you speak, probably not all of you. Here is lesson number 1. Wir werden jetzt anfangen, Deutsch zu lernen. Und ich möchte im Voraus sagen, dass nach meiner Meinung Deutsch ist eine sehr schöne Sprache. Und ich hoffe, dass Sie alle sehr viel Erfolg mit Deutsch haben werden. What do you think? If I kept speaking German like that, do you think?
Okay, write your percentages. What percentage of what he just said do you understand?
Think you would pick it up? No. How about if I repeated it? Would that help? No. How about if I said it louder? How about if I said it and then you said it back? How about if I wrote it out on a blackboard, on a chalkboard, and you copied it down? None of those things help. None of those things mean anything, and you can see that now. Here's lesson number 2. You can see me now, right? I hope so. Please nod. Okay, you see me? Because I can't see me. Okay, good.
Move the camera down a little bit. Excuse me. If you move the camera down a little bit.
Okay, I'm such a disaster on this technical stuff. I get pretty good and then they change it. Okay, so I generally have to call up my grandchildren. Okay, okay, here we go. Here's lesson number 2. Das ist mein Kopf. Kopf, ja? Verstehen Sie Kopf? Ja, gut. Hier sind meine Ohren. Ohren. Ich habe 2 Ohren. 1, 2. Und hier sind meine Augen. Augen. Ich habe 2 Augen. 1, 2. Gut. Und hier sind meine Zigaretten. Ja, meine Zigaretten. Ach, ich habe keine Zigaretten. Zigaretten sind nicht gut. Nicht gut.
Go ahead and write your percentages for this one and compare.
If you understood language number 2, not every word, but more or less, I did everything necessary to teach German. Wow, we acquire language in one way and only one way. Here it is, folks, when we understand it. Even if you didn't understand every word, if you understood a little, you acquired some language. Let me tell you some astonishing facts about language acquisition. Number 1, mentioned this before, you can't stop it. You can't turn it off. If you understood a little of what I said, you acquired some German, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's too late. That's how language acquisition works. Another interesting fact about language acquisition came from a guy named Leonard Newmark, who is kind of my cousin. This is really interesting. I'll give you some funny coincidences about my family on my father's side. About 20 years ago, my uncle and aunt had an anniversary, 50th anniversary, and we lived pretty close to them. We were very close to them. And we went over to the local synagogue to the party. So I walked in the door, and there was Leonard Newmark, a scholar from University of California, San Diego. I walked in, I saw Leonard. I said, Leonard, what are you doing here? He said, Steve, what are you doing here? I said, this is my aunt and uncle. It's their 50th anniversary. He said, no, it's my aunt and uncle. It turns out my uncle Boris Newmark married my Aunt Anne, whose brother was Leo Krashen, my father. Wow. And Leonard already had been thinking along the same lines I had. This is wonderful. His idea was this. He said, if we acquire language by comprehension of input, we must make sure people pay attention to the input. In order to help them pay attention, make it interesting. Duh, it's got to be correct, but we've never thought of that, okay? In fact, sometimes we go out of our way to make it boring, okay? So people will have more respect for us. The best way, I think, to make things interesting is to make it very interesting. The word I like is compelling. So interesting that you forget that you're listening to another language. So input has to be comprehensible, and at best, it has to be interesting. This is what we have to do. These are the fundamentals, I think, of optimal input. Okay, there's a little more than that, but that's pretty good. Okay, amazing facts about language acquisition: effortless and involuntary. Given comprehensible input, you have to acquire. It also means that talking is not practicing. Okay, this has happened to me when I was an English teacher. The supervisor, some of you have done this too, supervisor would come into my class and he or she would say to me, "You're talking too much. Get your students to talk." Remember that? No. It's your input that makes things happen. So we don't acquire language by talking. More output does not mean more language acquisition. More writing does not mean better writing. It's reading that makes you a good reader. It's the input that makes you a good writer, not writing itself. I want to put a footnote in here, extremely important to me. Writing does not make you a better writer because it's output, not input. But writing does something else, and that's wonderful. And I'm changing the subject a little bit. When you have some ideas, you write them down, they become clearer. You read them over again, you correct them, you revise, you grow intellectually. Writing makes you smarter. That's what I have learned from research on the composing process done by wonderful, wonderful scholars. Write it out, reread it. The first draft isn't going to be very good. Revise, revise, revise. Your writing gets better. This has nothing to do with language acquisition, though. This is about thinking. Okay, so we don't acquire language by output, by production. Okay, we don't acquire language by getting our errors corrected. In fact, the research is a happy coincidence. The research shows us that error correction doesn't work very well, okay? The study doesn't work very well, et cetera. On this business of late acquired study, I've gotten some very good advice from a man named Steve Kaufman. He is a polyglot, 20 languages, can you imagine that? And I also regard him as my language therapist. He has given people, including me, very good advice. Let me tell you what happened to me on a trip to Mexico about 2.5 years ago. I went to Cuernavaca where I spent about 10 days. I participated in a seminar. I gave my presentations in English, okay, to the teachers there, English teachers. And I lived in a house with other language teachers, okay? I like to go to their classes, hang out. And we had lunch and dinner together every day for about a little more than a week. All of them were native speakers of Spanish. All of them were Spanish teachers. I listened to Steve Kaufman's advice. Steve Kaufman said, "Don't worry if you make mistakes. Nobody cares. This isn't class. People are more interested in what you're saying. They're not interested in how you're saying it." That was just before I arrived in Cuernavaca, and I decided to check it out. Now, ser en estar, you cannot avoid, because every sentence you have to make a ser estar decision. And I can't bother. I know the rule. I can tell you about the rule. I've studied it, et cetera, but I can't think about it while I'm talking. So I made this conscious decision not to worry about ser estar, just accept anything that comes out. And you know, it gets even more complicated if you do it in the past tense, et cetera. I decided just to relax. Now at lunch and dinner, there with my friends, people I like and I knew very well, all we did was gossip over lunch, charlar, okay? It was wonderful. I decided to follow the advice of the daughter of American President Theodore Roosevelt. She was a very interesting person. She said, "If you don't have anything good to say about someone, sit next to me." So we gossiped about everybody. I had a wonderful time. I didn't worry about my grammar. And all these language teachers, nobody commented. We were too busy saying nasty things about other people the whole time. We had so much fun. That was a big breakthrough. Don't worry about it. There's no way to hurry it up. It's late acquired. I just have to wait till its time has come, and I'll get that by reading and listening. Kaufman also gave another related piece of advice. He said, does it ever happen to you when you're speaking another language and you've got a word in mind to use or a tense, but you're not quite sure it's right because it's only partially acquired? Like ser estar, I have very little feeling about which one is correct, a little bit, not much. And vocabulary use too. He said, don't worry about it, say it wrong, keep reading, keep listening. And that's what I've decided to do. So this stuff really, really helps. I think Steve could make a good living as a language therapist. He's very good, by the way. He and I have gone to dinner at...
Okay, we're gonna stop right there for today. So what do you guys think? Here's the thing.
Say that,
yes, go ahead, Viviana.
I can say that it is amazing information because as a teacher, it is surprising because what I noticed that I am doing wrong in my classroom. And I think that we are at time to make the class better, knowing that.
Mm-hmm. And we've known this for 40 years.
Oh, it was pretty, now that I heard it for the second time, when he mentioned the first lesson, he said, what if I repeat it? What if I say it louder?
Mm-hmm.
What if I copy and paste it or make students copy? And that's what most of us do in class.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That was pretty shocking. I'm still processing it.
Uh-huh. Any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, like kind of the way that like he says, like kind of like gossip, have fun, don't care about like what are you doing or how are you doing. And it's kind of like the way I learned English back in the day, because to be honest, like most of my grammar in Spanish is like non-existent. And when I learned English, it was just basically this kind of immersion in this group of friends. All of those guys were English teachers. And we learned to do things in English. I learned how to cook. I learned a lot of stuff like just in English. And I had no clue how to do those sorts of things in Spanish. And that's one of the things I've tried to encourage each one of my students, like find what you want and do it. And the thing that he was saying about like the small readings and simple readings was quite funny because when I was in Malta, I was helping this guy from Portugal. He loves horror. He loves gore. He loves like all creepy stuff. So I also love those kind of things. And I bought a book from June24, this manga artist. It was in English. And he struggled a lot with English during his lessons. But every time he will come home, we will just flip through the book and we'll finish it. And he was like, I think over like 1 week and a half or something like that, or probably 2 weeks, his production of English just like skyrocket. Like from all the things that he was looking and the manga and the vocabulary that we're going through, he was like, oh, I like that. How do I use it like this? It could be an adjective, could be an adverb, could be this. And then he just started putting everything together, and then he just bought the entire collection of the manga series. But yeah, like I've been doing some of those things like, I don't know, because of nature, because I don't have like the background of I'm an English teacher. I just learned English, and later on, like they told me taught it, and I was like, I'll try it, and I've been doing it, and I've been kind of successful. So
I can tell by the way all of you speak how you learned English, basically, based on these principles. Because Paco, you're extremely fluent. You're very conversational. You're super fluent. You have some errors, of course, just like everybody, right? But I can tell that you learn based on input because of your natural fluidity in the language, right? I can tell who spent a lot of time working with translation because you have a lot of negative transfer in your English and it's slow. Yeah, so like I can tell basically the background of most of you by the way you speak English now, how you learn the language. How many of you are exposed to a lot more input than others? What?
Can you
What? You all want your personal story now? You want to see if I'm accurate? Yeah, I mean, Paco is especially a case, and also I noticed another case that I think received a lot of input and less grammar rules is Isolina. Also, the way that she speaks English is, again, like not error-free. None of us are really error-free, right? But the fluency is the difference, the fluency. And we understand everything perfectly, right? And here's the proof, you know, that maybe Isolina and Paco, they didn't really have to study grammar rules like the guy in the video said yesterday, right? Que no pases, what is it, chancando en libros and things like that he said, right? But zambullido en el idioma. I think those were his words. So yeah, there's something to be said for that. Definitely. Okay, any other comments before we close the class today about the video? Maybe this is starting to revolutionize the way you're seeing things. Yes, Isolina.
I don't have a question regarding the video, but I do have a question regarding the final project. Like, what exactly do we have to do? What is, like, do we have to just choose something on second language acquisition, or could be in psycholinguistics? Because I know we have to turn this in like in less than 2 weeks.
Okay. Too bad it's like a buzzkill. We're all excited about the video, and now it's like, oh, we gotta talk about the final project.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Do you guys have a class after my class? Like after my class ends, do you have another class? Or are you guys on break? Mine's the last one of the semester.
No. We have pedagogical grammar, I think.
We have one more class.
You have another class. Okay. Okay, so normally what we do is like a research paper on any topic that we've covered in the entire course. So it can be anything on psycholinguistics or language acquisition. So we've seen a lot of things, right? You can remember back to psycholinguistics if you want to do a similar experiment to something you've already done in psycholinguistics, if you want to look at something in language acquisition. Now, assessing language acquisition levels and things like that is almost impossible to do. Like you would need to do a longitudinal study, which means that it needs to be over a long period of time, which is not going to happen for this class, right? So you could do something like error analysis in speaking, identify the errors in your students speaking, in your students writing, classify them maybe as interlingual or intralingual, for example. Are they lexical? Are they morphosyntactic? Things like that. What does it tell us about their interlanguage? You know, those are just some ideas, right? But you can't really measure their acquisition. You can look at their affective filters. Do they have high affective filters? You can kind of study that. You could try to correlate it with their grades, you know, but since your school year is pretty much over, it's going to be a little hard to work with students. So in that case, I'm offering you guys another opportunity, which is like, this is like the first time that I've offered a different opportunity to do something. Since I think that the principles that we learn in psycholinguistics and especially language acquisition are so crucial for teachers to know, as you guys are probably realizing now in carne y hueso, right? I think it would also be beneficial to the educational community because I'm all about giving back to the community. I think it's really important, like if you have knowledge, share it with people, you know, like so we can all move forward together, right? So another opportunity that I will be offering for the first time this semester is to make a video. You guys can make a video, like I would say somewhere between, in order for it to be equal to something like a final paper, I think the video would need to be between 12 and 15 minutes long about something that you consider that other English teachers should know, basically. So you can compile some of the things we've been doing. You can show them, here's an old school way, here's a better way to teach. You have, the sky's the limit. Like you can be creative as long as you incorporate components of this course, and your target audience would be other English teachers. And in fact, if you guys choose to do videos and they turn out well, I'm going to post them on the Facebook page that I have for the public school English teachers, which has 6,700 members basically. So we would share the videos because it does no good for me to watch the video and I already know this stuff. You know, if we're making videos, it's to be able to share them with other people. So
I'm sorry, Janine, but so we have to record actually the teacher and comment on the errors, or well, not errors, but
No. So you have an option. You have an option. You can either do research, right? Do actual research where you collect data and you analyze something, right? Or the other option is to create a video, basically a video of what English teachers should know about this stuff. Basically, that's the idea. So you can do that any way you want. You can like say, okay, guys, what's wrong with this lesson? And then you can do old school stuff, right? And then you can, okay, what's wrong with this lesson is this, this, and this. How about we do it this way? Here's a better way. Let's do it this way. This, you know, I'm just giving you ideas, right? But you have two options. Do research where you collect data and you analyze the data, or do a video for the English language teaching community of Ecuador about what they should know about language acquisition.
Teacher, if we choose the video, is it possible to do it in group, or should
Yes.
it?
Yes,
All right.
you can do it by yourself or with one other person or with two other people. So groups maximum of 3 people. Maximum 3 people per group, because it's a final. So I don't want like a bunch of people. It's your final exam. So up to 3 people in a group maximum. That's for the paper or for the video, whichever you guys choose. Okay, so that's your choice. Don't tell the other paralelos that I didn't, because I didn't give them that option.
We don't know them.
So 12 to 15 minutes, I would say. I mean, you could do the video in Spanish even, I wouldn't mind, because I think that, you know, some people don't understand all of this in English. So if you prefer to do it in Spanish, I can even give you that option, because the point is like to make it useful for other people. So whatever way you feel that it would be useful for other teachers who don't know this stuff, then that's fine. Okay.
Thanks.
So those are your options, and it's going to be well, we have our last class is next Friday, right? So a week from tomorrow is our last class, if I'm not mistaken. So that means that I can give you also the following weekend to work on it. Like after our last class, you can take the following weekend, but it would probably have to be due sometime the following week. Like I'm talking somewhere around maybe July 5th, 6th, 7th, around there, it would have to be due. Because I can't give, if I give you more time, you guys are going to get homework from Alejandra for pedagogical grammar, and it's just, you're not going to be able to work on the project anymore. So I can just give you the extra weekend to work on it, and that would be a good idea. Yeah, so it might be good to start brainstorming topics, start talking to people in your group if you want to work together with somebody. And maybe, you know, show me some ideas. Tomorrow would be a good idea if you can like start giving me some ideas that you have so that I can approve them and you can start working this weekend. Okay? Okay, guys. Go to bed. I mean, go have a beer, whichever you prefer. See you tomorrow.
See you,
Janine. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, Janine. Bye-bye.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thank you, teacher. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Janine. Goodbye.
Bye.